Hey everybody, and happy Sunday, and welcome to this powerful conversation that we're going to have today. So we already had a part of this conversation. You can actually see it on YouTube, and I recommend that you watch it. But you don't have to have had watched that conversation to be part of this one. This is a conversation about racism and what we in the queer community as family can do to make our community more equitable, more how we can dismantle some of those that racist culture and white supremacy within our community. I have a group of amazing folks with me here that I want to introduce because they're people who not only I love dearly, but really have a lot to say and can share a lot of wisdom about the subject. I want to first start introduce to you Kamora Herrington. As folks come on, if they can introduce themselves and just tell us what you have been up to since our last conversation.
So, hello, I'm Kamora Herrington, founder and visionary of Kamora's Cultural Corner. And since the last conversation, I've been continuing conversations. So, I've been lucky enough to have folks invite me into their spaces to have conversations. And it's just been a wonderful place where it's time for this conversation and people want to have this conversation. So, lots of different ways of creating spaces where this conversation can happen. That's what I've been up to.
Thanks for sharing. I want to next introduce Jesus Abraham Morales Sanchez.
All right.
Uh,
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. So my name is Jesus Morales Sanchez. I am an activist in New Haven, organizer, and currently an educator with Planned Parenthood. Part of the stuff that I've been up to since our last conversation, we're trying to revamp our STARS program, so trying to help redesign that and make sure that we're adding that very much needed racial justice lens to the work that we're doing and continuing to push to have those conversations among coworkers and our youth, because again, the youth are the future and hey, they're ready for this.
Thank you. I want to next introduce Bilal, who's also with us.
Hey everyone, my name is Bilal Tajildeen. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a Waterbury resident, and what I've been doing since the last conversation is I'm thinking of a lot of COVID-related things, and having, I guess, smaller conversations with folks about how we can each show up for each other in ways that are more accountable, right? Like where we can share with each other how our own internalized racism or anti-Blackness can show up and why it shouldn't. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And last but not least, Karleigh.
Good afternoon. My name is Karleigh Webb. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm an activist based in New Britain. I'm also a member of the New Haven Pride Center, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, a writer contributor for Outsports, and a crisis op for Trans Lifeline. What I've been working on since the last time we all talked and got together and fellowshipped about these issues is mainly doing a lot of my craft and my passion, journalism, in a sense, to talk about a lot of these issues, most recently being the issues surrounding gender, sports, and those intersectionalities and how they're relating to this greater present moment that we're in. And no two ways about it. It's good that we, as a queer community especially, are talking about how we become more united in this struggle, because we're going to need our unity and our strength and our courage now more than ever, because the situation is getting more dire. And by having these hard conversations, this is a matter of community self-defense. And I had said that the last time. This is about community self-defense. What we do here this afternoon is in the interest of community self-defense. So for those listening, put on your thick skin, take away your defensiveness, check it at the door. This is about our community.
Thank you. That's amazing. So before we start the conversation, I do want to acknowledge that Roslyn Sotero was supposed to be with us. She had an emergency, so we're sending her love that everything works out. We just did want to acknowledge that our sister was supposed to be here with us, and that we'll love her and miss her very much. But that being said, like Karleigh said, this is about community defense. And this is conversation, family conversation that sometimes can get a little bit intense, but it's beautiful and it's healing. And that's what we're here to do. And in the interest of family conversation, I want to start out by something that Roslyn said in the last conversation, which is how often we hear gay men, specifically, I think gay white men talk about their inner Black woman. And that to me rings a lot of the fetishizing of Black and brown bodies in our community. So I want to talk a little bit about that, about how a lot of the insidious ways that white supremacy comes into our community. And I want to start the conversation with some thoughts that you may have about the fetishizing of Black and brown bodies. I can call on people or we can popcorn it. If a brave soul wants to jump in, we'll do it that way. If not, I'm just going to call you like we're at school. So.
So we've discussed this one before, and this is one where we're going to address it here. And this is a part of the conversation that has to be an ongoing conversation. And as I've said forever, I completely get it, and it's beautiful, and I'm completely offended by it, and it's disgusting. And that's that place to step into this much larger conversation. In that a lot of our work is around intersectionality and really looking at that. And I know folks follow me on Facebook, and I know that our community is a small community. So there are probably some folks who watched my 30-second, oh my goodness, this is so great, Facebook Live yesterday, because I was listening to a Bell Hooks lecture, right? And so there's no way I'm doing anything Black and queer without listening to Bell Hooks for at least 5 minutes before I step into it. And what Bell Hooks was sharing was that she doesn't use the word intersectionality much, because it's this cute word that we use it and we think that we know what we're talking about, but we don't, and we miss the beauty. And so she talks about, so I'm talking about patriarchal, heteronormative, capitalistic, and this and all of this is what gets together to get us to this place. And when we look at this fetishizing, we're a very small part of a much larger community, and we very often forget that we're just a microcosm, and that we are. You want to see how ugly Trump America is? Look at gay America, and it's there. You want to look at how beautiful spiritual America is? Look at gay America, and it's there. We're just a microcosm of this larger whole. Very often we like to believe that somehow we are something special and outside of, but that still comes back to, hello, you got Kamora here. That takes us back to that place of identity development. And us as queer people really, really, really need to take our babies and our elders and everyone else in between and really hammer out what queer identity development looks like, what healthy queer identity development looks like and can look like, and then acknowledge the truth that for most of us, that beautiful trajectory of what that healthy arc can look like isn't going to be available to us. It's going to be something that's going to be more choppy like this. And so understanding, as I've said many times, and when you watch, please, if you've never seen, going way back to the original Trevor movie, watch that with these eyes. So use this lens. Young white gay boys have no vision of strength out there in the larger world, right? There is no place where today we're starting to see, and we're still seeing caricatures of it, right? So we're still, to use a phrase we can say, we're still seeing blackface of what this strong white gay man can be, right? So we're seeing caricatures of it all over the place. So our young white gay boys, as they're stepping into self, they're hearing that they're supposed to be better than everyone else. And then critical identity development happens. They're thrown to the bottom of the barrel. Black women are amazing and fierce. Ursula, can we talk about how Disney uses us? Like, they might make us octopuses, but they're still using Black women, and the euphemism is lost on no one. So when our beautiful Black babies take these larger than life caricatures of Black woman's strength, beautiful, wonderful, you found me, sweet baby. However, what you found was a caricature that you've gone and you've assigned all of this other stuff to. And then without us being willing to have the actual real conversation, when Black lesbians come in and say, this is offensive to me, and there has to be this white supremacist need to protect what that little white boy is doing at the expense of the Black woman's lived experience, we end up in this sick place where the fetishization happens and we can't step into a conversation. And how do we know what's true about a culture? By what the culture refuses to speak about, So we can talk about rainbows forever. That's not our culture. When we talk about how we've created this sick white supremacist pecking order inside our culture that we all understand, we all know how to play with. We all know when we can go to the Shay. We all know when we can't go to the Shay. We all know how much of our blackness we can bring to the Shay. We all know at what point we need to bring out our gay fabulousness to prove to people that we're not being too gay in this space. We all know how to play the game, but we don't put words on it. If that doesn't speak to the importance of racism in queer culture, nothing does. And that, again, is taking out everything that we understand about cultural development outside of the gay community, but applying what we know from social sciences outside of our community to our community that's thin-skinned, that really doesn't want to step into that arena. We want to be special. We want to understand that what we understand about human beings outside of our world doesn't apply to us. And that's a whole lot of words. Done talking now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Some thoughts about fetishizing of Black and brown bodies within the queer community? Maybe some stories?
Yeah. If I can jump in something Kamora said about the role culture plays, right? And I see this happen a lot with white gay men in the nonprofit space, where depending on the room they're in, they'll like adopt mannerisms or accents or say phrases that like in a white room they would never say, right? But they're trying to get an aspect of, I'm cultured, I'm in this sort of space where I can use these words, right? Because I have this identity, right? Yeah, and it's like it's so cringy when you get to see them in other spaces and you're like, oh, you're sort of like bringing out this affect when you're with people of color, but when you're with white people who would find it a turnoff, it's shut down immediately, and you're very prim and very proper. And for some reason, like to me, it also correlates to like where we consume our culture. And I was actually telling this to Roslyn recently, and because she had said something that reminded me of it. And TikTok, for example, I mean, the way white gay guys on TikTok create all of their content as a regurgitation of Black culture and passing it off as their own, right? Like it all sort of feeds in. And I think that part of the, as we're talking about racial justice and anti-racism, like that's like they're consuming it on a daily basis, and we're consuming it too, and we're circulating it, and it's sort of a vicious cycle. Yeah, cringy. It is cringy.
I just want to respond and speak to that because, Bilal, you spoke my truth. And there's this place where, there's impact versus intent. And I truly believe that many well-intentioned white gay men have met me with, oh, girl, can you believe that they're doing this here? But there's a level of disrespect that it's soul crushing. And I'm not trying to stand in a victim space right here, but I can't tell you the level of disrespect and pain, and then the pain and not knowing how to address it. Like, dude, really, we're at this fancy place with all these fancy gay people, and I'm feeling kind of cool. And I see you talking to other people with respect, and I hear you using, the language that you speak. And then you came to me, and somehow you're talking out the side of your face. We're supposed to talk bad about people. We're supposed to talk about how much we don't respect this event, where like, I'm the poor Black lady. So if I'm at the fundraiser, I am looking at the money, at the dollars being raised, because those dollars are going to go to my community, and I care, right? So that's what I care about. But there's this weird place there where they've assigned all these nasty, disgusting pieces of Black womanhood to me, and then try to meet me. And it's like, dude, it sounds huge, but this is serious. It is the nastiest whore moment ever. In queer space, when I am there, like, I'm very proud of what I do. I think that what I do well. And they're the people who will inbox me and ask questions about racism, and that's dirty. The people like, Kamora, I'm here to support you. And there's an interesting place that Connecticut and Connecticut queer community think about this. There's a lot of white gay people in our community who are inboxing Kamora Herrington and giving me money, but they know that if they do it in the larger white gay world, it will come back to them. What do I do? How do I say it? And how does racism exist in our community where white gay people in our community who are respected by the larger white culture understand that if they outwardly respect and support my work, there will be blowback? There's a very real need in the state of Connecticut for white supremacy and racism to lead the conversation. Now, I can tell you that pretty much every white gay man who I've felt the need to develop a relationship with, who's met me in that space, I've confronted him on it. And I said, you know what, this really feels kind of gross. Some of them are in that Kamora is a horrible, mean person camp, and we will never have conversation again. And many of them have said, I hadn't seen it that way. Let's have a conversation. And one beautiful human being in the moment didn't see it. And I will tell you quite honestly, a few years of seeing how the gay community, honestly, in this state, a few years of seeing what happened after we got marriage and what didn't happen after we got marriage created a place where 5 years later, this person came and said, hey, let's have a different understanding because I see this differently now. And that conversation started. There was was about 8 years ago. Isaiah's 8 years old. I'm sorry. I'm also a middle-aged mama, so I do time by Isaiah's age or Joseph's age. So Isaiah's 8. It was when I was coming back from Hawaii, so probably 7 years ago. The black lady world and the white gay man world blew up because a black cis heterosexual woman was offended by the way white gay men attack or claim her and try to own her. And I needed it to happen because it needed to be a cis sister who was not a lesbian. When it's us, white gay men, you have a special, beautiful way of attacking black lesbians that's painful and scary. And when y'all have decided that we are the devil, so in my world, as the black lesbian in the state who has spoken to men and said, hey, I understand that you were trying to meet me in this black lady place and that you found strength in the black lady place, but what I'm experiencing is extreme disrespect. The white man who can hear that and grow and move on, got you, this is beautiful. The one who can't is the one who's dangerous to our entire community. As we're watching not QAnon, but whatever they call themselves, but as we're watching all of this stuff happen, people who've been around for a minute, think about it. Think about the people who 10 years ago told you that Kamora was an evil, horrible person because she demanded respect and she made sure to bring the lived experiences of black and brown queer people into the room. Think about who's doing what right now. Dude, Juancarlos, I hate to do these. Told you so, but we really need to address it and being nice to the white racists and creating a place where we somehow don't address the sickness of white gay men putting on the cloak of black women in order to find strength. The fact that we sit back quietly and allow that to happen at the expense of black people, again, there's your white supremacy in the gay community.
Yeah. Karleigh, I haven't heard from you in a bit. I want to hear from you.
Honestly, you just let Kamora just go right now because this is this is very important information that people need to hear. I mean, I remember Kamora over the summer, we're sitting in the back patio of their place, and she's explaining this to me and breaking it down. And that's one of the many hard conversations that we as a rainbow family have to hear. Be it this conversation, be it the cis trans conversation, be it the conversation of sexism in our community, be it the conversation of complicity with imperialism within our community. We're going to talk about that. Because when we have a defense contractor underwriting pride, that's a problem.
Well, you said that you had this conversation in my space in the back, and that's something that I think all of gay Connecticut needs to understand. I'm not special. I'm awesome, right? But I've been the loud one in everyone's face for years because I don't know how not to be that. So white gay Connecticut, you abuse us. You abuse black and brown gay Connecticut. And the way that I know this is because since I have this voice, black and brown Connecticut comes to me. And after they've had a pride meeting where a black trans woman is made to feel as if she's not as good as everyone else, and then what happens in the meeting is because she brought in information that was important for that meeting, the white gay men in that meeting then decide to discuss all of the vacation homes that they own in Provincetown to prove to that black trans woman that she's not as good as them. When that woman feels pain and she calls me, we break it down. And in this state, as I speak of these, yes, everyone knows that I ran the mentoring program at True Colors for 15 years and had to deal with some real intersectional stuff because I had black and brown queer kids in out-of-home care, and I was matching them with white, affluent, queer people in Connecticut and all of the hijinks that ensue with that. Yup, true. And I'm the loud black person who goes to gay space and is black deal with it. I'm the loud gay person who goes to black, like I bring me, which means as Karleigh is talking about this, and there are places where in the state, people will say, hey, what does Kamora say? Because I have the conversation. And no, white gay America, understand that I refuse to have this. There's a conversation that I won't have with black gay folks anymore in this state, which is when we go out, we have to deal with racism. Understand that that's a conversation that exists in black and brown gay Connecticut. When we are making decisions about where we're going to go, it's not whether that place is racist or not. It's how much of the racism are we willing to deal with. That is our reality. All of these cute little ways that we talk about microaggressions, you guys have done a great job of identifying microaggressions. You don't have any clue what it's like. What, like my beautiful Puerto Rican brothers, boy, you are all some of the most sexy people ever. You're just fiery, aren't you? In all of these ways that right, dude, and it weighs, and we smile and we deal because we need community.
Cringy
and we smile and we
AF.
deal because there is no group of white queer people who don't have this piece of white supremacy in them. People come to, it's Kamora's Cultural Corner for a reason. It's because I don't live far from where I used to work. So after these awful meetings where the people who are supposed to be on our side. So again, we're in these meetings and we are the queer contingency. And there's some brown ones and there's some white ones. And then there's the them, right? There's the muggles or whatever we want to call those cishet people who live in the world that they do, right? But we're in this meeting. And we then realize in this meeting as the black and brown queer people, we're not just battling and trying to make sure that the needs of our black and brown queer babies are known to this group, but also to our folks, because white queer people who choose to not examine how white supremacy affects them hurt and destroy our children. I'm going to go to this one really quickly because I had to, because the spirit just spoke to me. I ran a mentoring program for black and brown queer kids in out-of-home care. Those kids had all the awful messages about white superiority, socioeconomic stuff, all of this stuff that comes to us. Let's step back. I'm pretending right now like there's no straight people watching this. We understand what they think about our community. We understand how our community actually operates, and we understand that there are certain conversations that we have not had because we can't have them in a mixed company. For my beautiful babies, when we are not discussing what racism inside the gay community looks like, we are setting them up for a world of hurt. Right now, I've got a crew of some late 20s, early 30s who heard when they were teenagers from white gay people what their reality was. My beautiful, let's use the word twinks, my beautiful, an 18-year-old beautiful twinks, my beautiful twinks between 18 and 24. They heard from Kamora what their reality was as a black, beautiful, gay child in this community was. They also heard from beautiful, well-meaning, see the glass is half full, boy, Kamora, we don't want to tell them about racism because why do we want to make this stuff live? They also heard from them what their reality was. 15 years later, who was right? It wasn't about being mean. It wasn't about holding white people accountable. It was about loving us and creating a place so that those 32-year-old men now hate white men. If we could have just stepped back and said, hey, this is what it is, then we could have dealt with it as it is in a much different way. I'm sorry, that's my phone doing its thing. There you go. But I think, and this is why when I was talking about the importance of this conversation, people run away from this conversation. Look at our 30-year-olds who we have stolen from their families because their black and brown families don't get their gay shit. And then they stop being beautiful twinks at about 28 years old. No one is there to carry them. And that's our fault, gay people. It's our fault for choosing to not have the conversation, for choosing to see the glass as half full, and for choosing to pretend as if black and brown, beautiful gay baby boys between 18 and 24 are an amazing commodity that is thrown away when we're done with them. Choosing to not have that conversation has created a place where there's a whole bunch of them out there who know that whatever Kamora says is true and whatever white gay Connecticut says is not true. And not because I'm fierce and have said something, but time has told a tale. One of my babies right now, who I know is watching, who sold their body for their entire 20s, we can have this conversation right now. And we can have this conversation because we had this conversation when they were 15 in a way that wasn't nice and their eyes weren't pretty. When I explained what was happening, it wasn't wonderful. It wasn't a happy conversation. But here we are at 30, and me and this person can look each other in the eyes and talk about 20s, and I know that that person is a beautiful, wonderful human being. That person knows that, And we also had a conversation before it even got there to say, hey, this could be your future because this is how it's being set up. And we'll still be here. And I took all my time, and on that one, I'm not going to apologize for the time, because y'all need to stop destroying my babies. Stop it.
That was amazing. Thank you. Jesus, do you have any thoughts that you want to share?
Sure. I mean, I'm just like still blown away every time that Kamora says anything. I'm like, what else could I possibly have in this conversation? It's just like amazing. Every time that Kamora speaks, I feel very warm and fuzzy and welcome, and it's just thank you, Kamora. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like, you know, I feel like every time that we talk about like racial justice within queer spaces, we a lot of the times, you know, like the immediate thought is like, oh yeah, we're gonna be talking about like how, you know, X white boy is racist on Grindr, or X white boy, you know, is like, you know, we're talking about like these like quote unquote little things, and I appreciate Kamora bringing the focus to the larger conversation that goes a little bit beyond interpersonal relations, and really talking about not only who we are as, you know, Connecticut queer community, but also organizational structures that are in place that are quote unquote advocating for queer folks, and that advocacy, that messaging gets lost because the wrong people are pushing the wrong narratives. They're not listening to the real struggles of queer people that are the most vulnerable. And what do I mean by that is like we are hearing the narrative of a lot of like suburban queer, you know, like youth that have a support network that are going through things. And again, we're still living in America in 2020. Being queer is not fun, is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, right? But also acknowledging that for some folks, it is gonna be a very different experience than when you are a Black, Latino, low-income, immigrant, queer, young person. And yeah, what are we doing to really elevate those narratives? What are we doing to really not just elevate those narratives, really just give the mic to the person that actually needs to share what it is to be a queer person in Connecticut in this day and age? Because working with young people, a lot of it boils down to like, yeah, my queer people are amazing. They're beautiful. They're so insightful and caring and loving. And there gets a point in which they are thinking about their future. They're thinking about what great things they're going to do once they go off to college, once they, you know, move out, and they just end up hitting a wall along the way. They end up hitting a wall because they are actually, the state that they thought was like super queer friendly did not really have the resources, adequate resources to support them, to help them. And what ends up happening, they start falling through the cracks. And those same very enthusiastic, idealistic, you know, full of energy queer youth are then seeing that the world is still an ugly place for them, that even the queer community will not extend a helping hand. And that is the disillusionment within this quote unquote community. And it bothers me that you know, we really pride, you know, especially gay men, they pride themselves in talking about a community. And yes, we're all a community. We're all one. We don't see color, right?
Ugh.
You know, especially here in Connecticut.
I forgot my mic wasn't unmuted.
My mic's off and ew.
But can someone explain that though? Because I still get the sad eyes. Like there's still the people who show up and say, I don't see color. And that's when inside I go, oh geez, here we go. But Jesus, can you explain why that is so ridiculous?
Because guess what? I want you to see color.
Me, right?
I want you to see my tan skin, my beautiful brown skin. that has been kissed by the sun and blessed by it. I want you to see that. I want you to see my cultural heritage. I want you to see the calluses on my fingertips because I'm flipping tortillas without a spatula.
Okay, you did that yesterday for the first time.
You got whole black lady fingers. You can do that. That works out. And that's the beauty. Like, that is the beauty. My sons, like, Joseph will watch it. Joseph will tell you, like, when I'm frying chicken, I got old black lady hands. There are times when I can flip it. Now tell me about this flipping tortillas. And that's the beauty. And if you hadn't shared the beauty of you, then we would have stayed in this ignorant place of not understanding. That's a wonderful thing. When I do it and my son sees it, I feel a little bit of pride. And I think about my grandmother, like, yeah, we're here.
Yeah, but I mean, putting it right now in like more like quote unquote proper terms, whatever that means, is like it really boils down to, you know, yeah, we're all equal. We don't see color. It's like saying, hey, I want us to be homogeneous. I want us to be the same. And what the same means is like be the status quo. The status quo right now is white. The status quo is I don't want you to deviate from whiteness. I want you to assimilate into whiteness. I want you to be part of that whiteness. And as we know, that is not just destructive for the people, you know, assimilating into whiteness, but for the entire communities, because that's how entire people lose their heritage. They lose their culture. We lose our, and, you know, folks that, you know, any minority, any quote unquote minority, we're not really minorities. I fucking hate that word. Sorry, I cursed. But any other non-white group has experienced this to a degree. And I've had these conversations with JC, like historically, you know, I have a severed connection with my heritage. Why? I don't even know what it was the language that my ancestors spoke. My great grandma speaks an indigenous language. I don't even know which language it is, because in the region there's like 4 that are commonly spoken. I don't know which one it is, and let alone I know nothing about the language. And that is like a piece of heritage that I know it's lost, and I'm not gonna get back as easily, right? And then we come back in here, and then on top of that, there's even another round of whitewashing. So it is a painful and traumatic process that unfortunately we see perpetuated in queer culture. And that boils down to the standards that we're seeing. What is a queer person supposed to look like in this day and age? And like, what is the right way to be queer, right? Like, what is the right way to be a trans woman? What is the right way to be, you know, a gay man? And if you go onto any social media, I talk to this with my kids all the time. They're the social media generation. They love their social media. I just opened a TikTok like last month. They've been on TikTok for forever. But you go on TikTok and you go on gay TikTok, and it's a bunch of white dudes. It's a bunch of white dudes, and we go back to the original like idea, replicating and taking away from Black culture, but not crediting Black culture, not acknowledging that a lot of those things that make them so edgy and so unapologetically queer come from Black culture, specifically from Black trans women. And that is a problem. So
thank you. I think the next thing I want to talk, and I want to start with Karleigh talking about this, is I feel that sometimes as a community we're afraid to have these conversations because we go into toxic positivity, where we think if we say things like what we were saying, oh, I don't see color, or well, I love Black and brown people, like that racism goes away, right? And the reality is like it's a lot harder than it just going away, and we have to have these intense, uncomfortable for some conversations that we really have to bring it up and see it and shine a spotlight on it. And I want to talk about some of that toxic positive racism doesn't exist within like some of the institutions, some of like the nonprofits, like Bilal touched a little bit. Can you reflect on some of that a little bit?
First, let's talk about that. I don't see color. And I'm going to add being trans here too. Well, I don't see you as black and trans. I do, because that's the reality of my life. If you don't see color, it's an color to many white folks is this esoteric academic discussion. Color to me means life and death, because that's where we're at, especially right now in the Trump era. The color line is life and death. It was life and death for George Floyd. It was life and death for Ahmaud Arbery. It was life and death for Breonna Taylor. Oh, by the way, Breonna Taylor's killers are still free. It's life or death for 16 people who are trans like me. And of those 16, 15 are black and trans black, trans, and women like me. When I walk out the door, my head's on a swivel, because I don't know if I'm going to be number 17. And then, like I say, I get to die twice, once physically and then once in the print and broadcast media, because they just feel the name to dead name me. You don't see color, you're full of it. I have to see color. I have to see transness. I have to see orientation. And it's about time, y'all. I find that interesting. White folks can see Elvis, they can see the Loch Ness Monster, they can see angels, but they can't see racism. How does that work? What is the color of the sky in that world? Or what are you smoking? If you're smoking something like that, puff, puff, pass. Please let me have some of it, because it must be some powerful stuff. But we see this, but that's what we need. But that's part of the hard conversations we need to be having within our nonprofits, within government spaces. And I am going to throw a bone here, because I believe I'm going to throw a little bone to one person who's doing it. The person who's behind the scenes here, Patrick Dunn. And I'm pretty sure at one time or another, Patrick Dunn has had his edges singed, hearing what he's heard in his own education, but yet keeps coming back, keeps learning. And he's not the only one. I can point to white folks in my life, especially at the beginning of this beautiful transition ride, who probably walked away saying, Karleigh's just mean. She's just mean. She's just an angry black woman. But when they let it marinate and realize what's going down and study what's going down, they come back saying, Karleigh, you're right. Where can we do? What comes next? I agree with toxic positivity. And I think there's a little bit too much of it, when the fact is we don't need the fake saccharine Disney positivity. There's a lot of good that's going on. There's a lot of good that's happening. And we've seen it here in Connecticut. The thing isn't that we got marriage equality. That's a good thing, because that's helped a lot of people, not just the wealthy, affluent gay people, but the working class gay, lesbian, queer folk who probably never had health care until that marriage thing came down, who never had a greater piece of economic security until that marriage equality came down. We've done some good things, but it didn't come out of pie in the sky and because of will and grace. It came because a lot of people were willing to put their shoe leather, their names, and sometimes their butts on the line to make it happen. That's how marriage equality got passed. That's how we got those Supreme Court victories that we got back in June. That's how we got gender identity as a protected class in the state. It didn't happen because anti-LGBTQ waved a magic wand. It happened because a lot of people got off their butts and they marched on Hartford and they marched on Washington, and they rose up in one voice. I am queer. I am here. Get used to it. And that's how we're going to get past these times now. But to do it, again, we don't need to be saccharine about this, which means, yeah, you're going to get your edges singed once in a while. You're going to get your wig pulled. You're going to get your card pulled. But the key is, we're trying to get people right now. We have a lot of people who are starting that they're just white. Our goal is to get those people to at least become allies, but then realize, or at least become woke. Let's just even start one step before. Woke just means you're awake. Great. But what happens at the beginning of the day? You wake up. It's only the beginning of the day. What are you going to do with it? And then we're going to at least get you to that allyship point, which is still problematic, but it's better. But it's better because at least you're cognizant of it. But ultimately, we want to get you to the point where we want to get you to that accomplished point. We want to get you to that point where you're not just saying, oh, this is terrible, what can I do? You're like, I know what I need to do. And you're going to walk in to that space. And it may be 15-1, but you're going to walk in that space and say, you're being cringy, you're being exploitive, and this is wrong. And we need to be standing with our black and brown rainbow family right now. You're going to be the one that will pull that coin. That's going to pull that collar and says, excuse me, fellow white gay person, I need to minister to you for a second about what you just said, or that joke that just wasn't funny, or that grant that you're not going to give those people. And first off, why are you using the term those people? In short, I want a cadre of white queer rainbow family who will act a fool so I don't need to. That's when you know progress gets made.
And we'll only get those folks, Karleigh, until people, or it's not going to happen until people really address that toxic positivity, which has to be. And I'm thinking about like the places where it's reared its ugly head. Monica Roberts, and I'm tossing my sister out. So Monica Roberts is a Black trans woman. She's an activist. She's been doing the work in Texas for all of us for a very long time. And the state of Connecticut, not meaning state of Connecticut, but I mean each and every last one of us as human beings in the state of Connecticut owe that woman a check. Because when I had my beautiful Black and brown trans babies and everyone was trying to say, everyone who was physically in proximity to them, this is great, you are wonderful, you need to be respected, you need to just walk out and be who you are, and all of this wonderful stuff that in no way gave them space to wrestle with who they were and how that was going to affect their lives. And again, so Bilal was talking a little bit about elders, and this is what brought Monica in. It was amazing. I had quite a few beautiful Black and brown trans babies in this state who were not getting real support. They were getting that glasses half full, oh my God, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous, how bad are they for not seeing this nonsense, right? And in my estimation, definitely hurting them and creating places where they were not going to ever be able to own themselves and hold themselves in strength as beautiful human beings. And Monica Roberts wrote she wrote physical letters to my children, wrote long page after page after page of, this is who you are, this is who we are as a woman. And even to the point of like, because yeah, I read the letters, but even to the point of, this is my truth walking through, in Texas as a Black trans woman in this place. Your reality is going to be somewhat different. I don't know. You're 30 years younger than me. You're starting your transition in a different place, all this stuff, but places where real conversations were happening. And my question for white gay Connecticut right now, the takeaway is, why are you so fucking scared of the truth? Why? Why does the reality of how we walk through life on a daily basis, why does that offend you so much that you ask me to step into a lie with you? That the only way that you can see me as not an angry Black woman trying to bring you pain is if I meet you in a lie about what the lived realities of myself and other people are. That is a strange place that I've never figured out. But on this one here, there's this very real need for us all to lie about what really is. I mean, when I talk about my beautiful 18-year-old Black queer boys being trafficked, I know that there are people who are listening to this saying, there she goes again. Dude, if you can show me a beautiful, good-looking Black gay man who is 24 years old, who has not been propositioned to have sex with someone for money, please do it. I need to meet that person. I truly need to meet that person. Years ago, I had a young man. He was 19 years old. He was not going to allow the state to take care of him. He was going to step into porn, right? And from his point of view, this was wonderful because porn, he was going to get paid in a legal way. He was going to own himself. It was wonderful. On that one, I had the other side. I had a whole bunch of white folks telling me that he should love himself so much that this shouldn't be his reality. They weren't trying to pay his rent. They weren't trying to give him education. They weren't trying to give him food. Some of these people were people who had no problem seeing him in space and telling him how incredibly gorgeous he was and how wonderful, like some real sick shit. You're going to come meet this person in space, gush on and on about their thin, tall, yeah, I'm talking to y'all, so you know what I'm talking about. Their beautiful, thin, tall body, their beautiful chocolate skin. Every word that's going to come out of your face is only speaking to the value of what their body brings. This person who no one is trying to take care of them has figured out that they can step into this world of porn and get their needs taken care of in a way that they'll actually pay taxes and be a full member of society. But all of these other people wanted to come in and tell them that it was a bad idea. I found a person, and I know this person was watching on Facebook. Darling, I hope that you're still watching right now. And this is a white queer man who has figured out, who had done some work in the porn industry. And guess what? When you're a white gay man in porn and a black gay man in porn, your reality is completely different. And this person was able to talk this person through that. And this person ended up with doing some internet stuff that, again, my values, not cool. We had a choice. We could be homeless. We could have dirty, nasty sex with gay men in downtown Hartford and live in a hotel. And we can all pretend as if that's not happening when we see each other at the Shea. Or we can figure out how to do this internet thing in a way that I can maybe walk away with some dignity. And the weird place where people were on that one, why do we need to meet in lies? Where is the safe? There's got to be safety in it. But this is a very real question. And I gave all of those words to get to a place that hopefully people can step into this question. White, gay Connecticut, why do you need us to meet in lies about who we are and how we live?
Yes, 1000% Kamora. The conversation about like eldership, and I think thinking back to like the racial justice, right, in the queer community, and the way ideally eldership plays a role in that, right? Because we are people who can't necessarily look up to our vertical relations, right? Our parents or grandparents or such, because they don't have the lived experience, they don't necessarily have the context, right? So we look for other people to fill that role for us. And I think I've never lived in another state other than Connecticut, right? So I can only really speak to Connecticut's landscape, but the lack of, I don't want to call it good, but maybe positive eldership in the state is really super detrimental. And it's going back to like what you're saying, Kamora, about how the people we are supposed to look up to like do not have our best interests in heart, right? Like, and not only do they not have our best interests, they can often do really deep harm that doesn't surface until later, right? And we don't know because we look at someone and they tell us that like, oh, you're really great. I really like you. You're part of this community, part of this whatever, right? And because like our base instinct is to feel that, we are like, okay, yeah, that's great. And then slowly and surely these things sort of deteriorate, right? And the problem with I think the landscape of eldership is that there's no one else there to help pick that. Well, there's not no one else there. There's Kamora. Kamora's there to help pick that up. There's not a lot of people out there who are there to pick that up and be like, this is harm. You are being harmed. And I think I work in the nonprofit world, and I think that we sort of keep this idea going because we refuse to do anything really substantial about it, right? Because we want to keep our young people the way they are, right? Because they are serving a purpose for people who can get that purpose. And it a lot of times it sounds like really nefarious, get down sort of a way, but it is.
I think, did we lose Bilal?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, I think we lost him. Oh, did we get you back, Bilal?
I didn't know I was gone.
You sort of froze.
What did I?
You froze for a second.
Oh. Well, I hope everything came through. I don't know what got cut off, but yeah, just the role of eldership is something I think about a lot in the queer community. And thanks for bringing it up.
I was just going to say, so in the chat, when you're speaking, Bilal, I brought up, it gets tiring, so thank you so much and I truly appreciate my position in our community in all the interesting ways that it is now. It's wonderful. And I can tell you that a whole lot of my peers have gone home. And there's that beautiful place where, the beautiful Black lesbian who came after me, she's gotten tired out and burnt out. So hopefully there's another one that's coming. But the truth is, it gets tiring, and there comes a point where you can only deal with it. So I'm uniquely built for this in some strange ways. I thrive in this stuff, right? But when you realize that this group that's supposed to be your community that you're working with is a community that's actively fighting against you most of the time, it just gets tiring. And so this young Black trans woman who I was talking to recently, it was a very strange conversation. And I felt as if I was almost stepping into an abusive space by asking her to continue taking it. And there's a weird place of like, when I step away from here, what happens? A lot of people have asked me, Kamora, why were you at True, like this? And definitely, and honestly, some of my kids who are now adults, who are social workers, and we're having different conversations because they are now peers in the work. And it's, why did you stick it up? Why were you there so long? And it was, well, what happened to you? So you're in that meeting. What if I wasn't in that meeting? That's why. And I think for some of us, I think for all of us, there's that weird place where you end up really having to weigh the pros and cons. And when do I give up? I can tell you that there have been times after ACFs, after DCF meetings, where I've looked a young person in the eyes and said, I took the fight as far as I could take it. The truth is, right now, you don't see it because you're 15. I'm trying to play a long game. And if I do it all right now, boy, honey, your life is going to be even worse. So let me explain to you the importance of the spook who sat by the door. Let me explain to you the importance of that Uncle Tom role that other folks in our community try to say is so horrible, because right now what we're really trying to do is to create the best outcomes for you, not stand on a social justice platform that proves to people how great we are. And I think that that's a place that definitely in our community we need to take much more seriously. So as Bilal talked about this place of elders, I talked about, fashioning myself after my grandmother. This is wonderful. As queer folks, we are one of the only minority groups whose parents don't come from the exact same minority group. We have to cultivate beautiful intergenerational relationships. We need to normalize them across culture, which means that we then have to have some ridiculous conversations. That was at Mambla or whatever that sick ass group is that keeps trying to jump in and play with us. And we keep saying, yeah, no, that's not us, and going on. We need to delve deep into that conversation. And we need to have that conversation as deeply as we can have it. In this world of expanding genders, can we go back and have a conversation about gay men and lesbians and what that is, so that we can then have a conversation about gay men and trans men and gay men and trans women and lesbians and trans men? And like, there are so many places where there are about 800 bazillion conversations that we should have had in order to be able and ready to have the conversations that we should be having now. But as a group, and this is where my frustration and fear happens right now, we are finally seeing, by choosing to not have these conversations, we've gotten to this place and it's a problem. So let's sweep it under the rug and not have conversations again and keep going. And that is my big fear right now, that as we're here, people are still trying to take the easy way out. Like, oh yeah, you're right, Black Lives Matter. This was a thing. Now let's move on. Let's move on. This is something, and again, lesbians and new age folks, boy, it gets like that, right? So it gets there. But that toxic positivity and this fear-based desire to not examine the thing that happened, but just to say it's never going to happen again and move on, keeps us here. So listen to Black trans women, listen to my sisters, please listen to them. I listen to them. Karleigh will tell you, she'll tell you that she takes advice from me. I asked Karleigh to serve me my ass, and she does. I say, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going, this is what I think, and I'll be there, and I'll be in a Kamora flow. And my sister shuts me down, and I shut up, and I listen. If there, and there are many places, like in the last couple of months, I've been saying this, I wish that I could create a place where, and definitely specifically white gay men could watch Kamora take her marching orders from her sisters and her mothers. Because I am fucking brilliant. And I've got a lens and a perspective. And other folks, and definitely my Black trans sisters who've walked my walk, and then some in other ways that I can never even fathom, they're going to have a different lens and perspective. And when we can love and respect each other enough for them to say, yeah, Kamora, but you're missing an important point. Karleigh, that's you, right? Yeah, but Kamora, you're missing an important point. That's where the beauty comes from. The reason why y'all think I'm so fucking brilliant is because I listen to brilliance and respect it. White gay men, the reason why y'all sound so freaking ignorant, and when you're done talking, we go talk about y'all behind your back for days, stuff that y'all said as MCs, as just throwaways at drag shows, boy, we hold on to those for years. Those dumb things that you say happen because you don't listen. Those dumb things that you say happen because Kamora says some shit like this. You understand that because and because you're in debate club and you can be so friggin' outside of it, that you're somehow not a racist tool. And then the racist tool words come out of your face. Listen, shut up and listen.
I have a question from the audience that I want to pose to everyone. It says, I'm curious to hear thoughts from panelists about the lack of language justice, language access / translations in queer spaces. Who wants to reflect a little bit on that?
I can, I guess, talk a little bit about it. I mean, and like putting it in the perspective of like the racial justice, like the topic of racial justice in queer spaces, definitely there, you know, there is an element. Hold on, let me formulate this the right way. It is part of that same lack of racial justice within queer spaces, in which, again, at least, and this is like obviously very US centric. English is the default. English is what is desired, and anything else is quote unquote exotic. It's quote unquote just the seasoning after the fact. It is, oh my God, hablas español. Like, yo también hablar español. Es muy exótico kind of
My
thing.
favorite.
Oh. Anyway, but
Tell me no one actually did that.
oh.
Please tell me
They
someone
do.
actually did
All
You
the
that.
need to go
time.
once COVID is gone, we need to go party together because
Yeah, just be with us for 10 minutes, and it happens all the time. Like someone comes
Yeah.
up to me, and they'll be like, "Hi, what's your name?" And I'll be like, "Juancarlos." And they'll be like, "Oh, me gusta." I'm like, "Stop! Like,
Stop,
I don't ruin your language. Don't try to ruin mine. Also, I speak perfect English."
I thought I was the only person that ever felt that. You know, like Kamora was talking about, when someone looks at you and immediately somebody who could talk like, "Hi, my name's Kelly. Hi, my name's Kelly. Hi, Kelly. I'm Karleigh. Oh, holler."
Oh, it is absolutely the worst. But where does that stem from? And it stems again from like the preconceived notions of what is the status quo. Now, definitely there is definitely, what I think that the question may be referring to, maybe more towards like spaces like this in which language is like, I'm not gonna lie, this is this very event is probably excluding certain people because I don't believe that we have like closed captioning or sign language happening at this time, and that is definitely a larger conversation that we're gonna be needing to have, because that boils down to what is ableism within our community as well, and that's gonna look at a variety of different ways, because within that, we cannot only just assume that we need to do ASL for like folks that use sign language, but like acknowledging that ASL in itself is not a universal language. It is one of many sign languages, and that Spanish speaking folks don't use ASL. They use a different sign language. So if we wanted to do that, it would be, really need to talk about how is it that we can accommodate, not accommodate, how can we change the structures that we're using currently so that is a possibility? Because the way that our structures are built right now, they're not built to even accommodate those. And I'm using accommodate as kind of like the band-aid of this issue. When we're talking about access to like interpreters of other languages, that is another issue, because even in the cases that there is an interpreter for an event, it tends to be English, Spanish only. And great, as a Spanish speaker, sure, that's cool. But when we're talking about like and I'm thinking I'm coming from the immigrant rights movement folks, when we're talking about like some of the most prominent like immigrant groups in the state of Connecticut, a lot of it is like Haitian folks that speak French, or folks that speak Creole, or that they, there's so many other languages that and we're having like these conversations that, again, are not reaching the people that they should be reaching. I don't need, and this is with all the love in the world, I don't need the white audience and that we're having right now to listen like everything about this conversation. A lot of it should be going to the most vulnerable population, and that is the one that we're probably not reaching, because we need to let them know that, hey, you're loved, and we're working on it, and we are planning on making sure that this queer community really becomes a community, and really that if you're feeling like you're falling through the cracks, we're here, and we're gonna do what we can to help each other out, elevate each other out, help each other, mutual aid, doing all the things. But unfortunately, because of that, we're not reaching those folks. Yeah.
I think I just want to jump in real quick and say something about this. I was trying not to talk a lot, and the panelists talk about it. I feel really compelled to say this. I think like often when we talk, the insidious way that white supremacy touches justice around language is that we think that if we bring in Spanish, we're good, right? And the reason we feel that way is because Latinos are the more palatable, the more okay minority, right? Because some of us look more white, some of us can blend in easier, some of us have a less thicker accent, and some of us, because this is a conversation that we have to gather our Latinos brothers and sisters and sit down and really have this conversation, love to align with whiteness, and that makes the white man feel really good. So it's become this thing where like, oh, if I have Spanish, everything in Spanish, it's fine. Look, we did the thing. We did the language justice, and we forget that there's like so many other languages. And that's something that came up like during the census. There was a whole bunch of people in the room talking about like, oh, we have to make sure we get like Spanish speakers, and I was like, yeah, what about Arabic speakers? What about like people who speak all the other languages that our beautiful community speaks? And they were all like, what? Oh, well, we didn't think about that. It's like, well, yeah, that's obvious, and so that's just something I wanted to talk about, because I think sometimes when we have a conversation about language justice, especially in conversations like this, a lot of people on the outside connect it with like, oh, this should have been done in Spanish, or this should be Spanish subtitles. And that just goes to kind of talk about, it's almost like a slight level of toxic positivity that I was talking about earlier with language, where it's just like, if we say it's in Spanish, like we fixed it, we fixed the racism around language access. So I just wanted to talk about that. And if anybody else wants to reflect on it, Bilal, maybe.
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I forgot to mention this earlier. Karleigh, when you were talking about marriage equality movement and health insurance, I forgot to mention after that as a reminder for folks listening, if you're someone who lives with a disability, you still don't have marriage equality because of the way health insurance works, which is important because you can be queer and live with a disability. It's still part of the movement. We haven't forgotten, but it still does not exist because healthcare is a racket, and it's not for us. But so sort of about language, right, and access. I just put in the chat here for our panelist friends that one of the pro tips of being Arab is that no one tries to butcher your language, and in fact, no one tries to speak it. There was a time period where I used to work in downtown Waterbury, and like I'd drive into like the parking garage and like I'd play Arabic music in the morning. And like I could guarantee you, because of the way like the light was in the parking garage, they can't see you until you get close enough. And like it was like a gradient scale of a dirty look. The closer I got to them, the less angry or like afraid people looked because they recognized it was me. I tried that for like about a week and a half, and I was like, this is just not the right way to start a day. And so I stopped doing it. And we're coming off the heels of Friday, right? And there was a time in my life, talking about language accessibility, where we were told not to speak Arabic outside of the house, particularly in those first few years, right? Where, anyone who's from the Middle East can tell you about friends of family or family who got swept up in those New York City midnight raids and literally just never came back. And so I don't know. The first time I ever heard Arabic in a queer setting was actually at Pride, maybe 2 years ago. There was one float for a group in New York City, and that is to this day been my only experience hearing Arabic, anything in a queer space. Because sort of, and we talked about this before, and maybe even in the first one, like black and brown, in Connecticut, what does black and brown mean, and where does Arab fit, and where does, and we don't really have a space that I know of. I mean, if there is a space, hit me up and let me know. I haven't found it, and I am looking for it.
Yeah, when I think of language and accessibility and such, I immediately go to the wrong language and how respectability politics has created this right way of speaking queer, and so queer is a part of this right way of speaking queer, right? So when I go in Muggle space, I'm sorry, but J.K. Rowling has been up a lot late, so Muggle space is what I'm using. But when we go into these spaces, if I truly have to spend if you've only figured out how to give me 90 minutes of your time, and I have to truly spend the first 20 minutes coming up with definitions so that we can step into a conversation, we've done it wrong. And this is a place where I think as queer people and queer academics really need to shut up and like, dude, mental masturbation is amazing. I shared, I love, bell hooks, these huge words that say this meaning. I get off on that shit, right? It feels great in my mouth. But am I here to step out into the world to let the world then know that I'm better than them and have a better vocabulary? Or am I truly trying to create dialogue so that we can grow and see each other across culture, right? So we looked at that. It's beautiful. Intent versus impact is very, very important. We're making it clear in most of our engagements right now that we care way more about intent than impact, because the truth is, when it hits me, my job is to figure out how to deal with that, and that's my job. But if I'm going to shut down true dialogue and conversation because that person doesn't have the right language, not because that person knows that faggot hurts me and they're going to yell that at me to hurt me, but if the language that they have is so upsetting to me that I can't even step into the conversation, who the fuck is the problem? And that is something that us as queer space, and I use faggot because there was this beautiful place where I had these wonderful young white interns who were better than everyone else because they knew all the right words and they weren't going to fuck anyone's pronouns up because they were great. And my beautiful, sweet little black boys came in who were faggot this, faggot that, she, her, speaking the language of their culture and their people with each other in larger gay space. It was made abundantly clear to them that their way of being gay was bad and wrong, and that clearly because of how these young women understood language, that they must be filled with self-hate. Not that they're stepping into themselves as black gay men and using the language of their culture with each other in a larger space to share love and joy, right? So as they're stepping into the beauty of who they are, I get off on this shit, but as they're stepping in the beauty of who they are, the good academic gatekeeper gays let them know that their language was inferior and wrong. That shit's got to go. The Latinx, like Bessie Reyna, when Bessie Reyna had some shit to say about Latinx, I was like, oh, here we go. I need to see the Latina lesbians do this one. Because and that one, I don't have shit to say. That's not my stuff, right? I've got nothing to say on that. I will take my marching orders in whatever room I'm in, whatever they tell me to say, I'm going to say it because it's not mine. On this incredibly important language stuff, it's important that you know how I feel about words. It's important that we have these conversations that get to the roots of cause of words. Like, if anyone remembers being on those wonderful journeys with young gay men talking about faggots and talking about bundles of sticks and talking about burning witches and having that beautiful dawning and epiphany, I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation and how many times I've watched the young man have the epiphany and then watch the conversation go to the place that it's got to go, right? I love that. And I understand that if we're going to be such gatekeepers about language, we are practicing white supremacy, no matter what it is that we think we're doing, no matter what and that is why the KCC, very clearly, we are Black and queer and Afrocentric. We're not Eurocentric. November 14th, and if you're into astrology, there's a reason why it's the 14th. But we're renting an RV, right? Because this awful election is happening and we can't breathe because half of the country is on fire. And so we're getting ready to go and podcast across the country, stopping and talking to other people like us. And without this idea that we're going to get to answers, right? Because the questions, right now it's all about the questions. So we're going to be hitting, Pittsburgh has a whole bunch of Black queer folks. So we're going to be hitting Black, queer, brown queer folks across the country talking. And regionally, we have very different words that we have for who we are. When I go down south and Black people are talking about me like a red bone, I can either choose to waste my time with them by explaining how incredibly disrespectful that word is, or I can understand that regionally that's the word that they use for people like me and have a conversation. So accessible language, incredibly important. One thing that we need to do way better is stop fucking policing people out of ideas. So Karleigh, I want to hear what you've got to say, but I do want to throw out just a commercial. There's this television show called Atlanta, which is this great, wonderful TV show. And there's an episode called Montague. And if that episode doesn't make it quite clear that that entire writing room is a whole bunch of Black queer people, you got this man. He's got some nuanced thoughts. He wants to share it. Guess what? The gay gatekeeper is so upset by all of the words that he tries to use, the man can never share a thought. A thought is never shared because the words are wrong. Dude. Karleigh?
No, Kamora, you hit the nail on the head there. For me, language justice also involves, because I can't stand respectability politics in any form. The mere concept is lost on me. It's been lost on me, especially being a Black person with 49 years of experience in being a Black person in this society. I understand full well that respectability will not save you. And part of that respectability and part of language justice to me is also, there are certain words that people don't want us to use that need to be used. Disability is a word we really don't like hearing much in a queer space. And I'm glad that Bilal spoke that. Normativity. What is normal? What does that mean? We don't like questioning that in a queer space. Oh, and of course, we don't like the word racism. Oh, no. We don't like that. And we don't like the word imperialism. We don't want to talk about how queer people were asleep at the switch over what's going on in that southern border, when there were LGBTQ people dying in those camps, when there are trans people dying in those camps. 1 hour from where I sit right now, there's a group of people in Northampton, Mass, who saw their duty and they did it, and they are helping trans asylum seekers, victims of imperialism. I want to mention this real quick because it needs to be mentioned, especially in this space at this time. When we are talking about those situations, we're talking about the work that Jesus is doing. We are also talking about how we are complicit in this country in the devastation we've wreaked on those societies. That's why those people are here. The actions of our nation's military and intelligence apparatus in Guatemala, in El Salvador, in Nicaragua is the direct effect of what we're seeing at that southern border. And we need to be speaking on it. And our community especially needs to be speaking on it, especially when you have a defense contractor underwriting and financing a pride in this state. Let that sink in.
That speaks directly to Bilal and the fact that we do not have our elders sharing, because there's no way, if our Stonewall vets were respected and a part of the conversation, there's absolutely no way that nonsense would have happened at Pride. And if they were respected, if we as a culture, so queer folks as a culture, if we could respect our elders and the wisdom that comes with them, like that was, how the hell do you celebrate Stonewall while shitting on our elders and veterans like that?
How in the world do you let a movie get made which whitewashes it? That in itself is part of the issue. We whitewash our history. How
are we having pride events with SWAT trucks in the middle of it as an attraction?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I said it.
Yeah, you went there. You went there. Hey, Seuss, what about this war on drugs thing? You brought it there. No, people need to hear that. This is part of language justice. We need to speak the things we don't want to speak on, but need to speak on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, like the war on drugs basically is like these decades-long failed war to try to stop narcotics come from like South America, right? So name it Colombia, name it Mexico. What it has ended up being is the U.S. funneling money and guns down to the southern border. And what happened? A lot of that money and a lot of those guns ended up in the hands of the very same groups that we're trying to dismantle, right? It's cartels and organized crime organizations. Like it's insane. And the end result has been that civilians in Colombia, in Mexico, Salvador, Guatemala, all the very same countries that right now are fleeing violence because of quote unquote gang violence, it is because of those very decisions that the US has made in their foreign affairs. When we're talking about like all the gangs that exist in LA, in Washington, in all these great metropolises, MS-13, MS-15, like all these different things. You know where they started? They started here in the US. And what happened is that the US took these people, deported them back to Salvador, Guatemala, and when all these operations funneling money to the Latin American countries to fight organized crime through the corrupt governments that the US has backed by destroying democratically elected governments, that's where like the major gang organizations happen in Latin America. And this is like obviously like very condensed, very summarized. If you want to like read about it, I invite you to actually like go and like look and dig a little bit deeper in the history. But it is those same organizations that if you go to any asylum hearing or any asylum interview ever for a person from Guatemala, El Salvador, what's the other? Oh wow, I've never been good at geography, but Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico, those same quote unquote gangs are the ones that are going into villages and extortioning farmers, telling them, you need to pay us royalty for using this land because this land is ours now. And that is the reason why we have this influx of unaccompanied minors that are being recruited, actively recruited into gangs. And if they refuse, they're being shot at. Their houses are being like set on fire. And that is part of that same violence. But that's okay. That's a whole other deal. But that's also a queer issue because guess what? Gangs down there also target queer folks. And we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the queer folks that are right now in concentration camps on the border. We're not talking about how the fact that because quote unquote gang violence is no longer a protected status for asylum claims, those queer folks are now left in there. And a lot of them, when they go back, they're killed. And if they come here, we have cases like Roxana Hernandez, who was sexually abused in her home country multiple times, where she was infected with HIV, decided to flee her country to seek a safe haven, came here, got arrested at the border, put in a concentration camp, physically, mentally abused, and ultimately she died because of AIDS complications along with physical abuse. There is still no one being held accountable for her death. So a little bit of like queer history for the books, because she was a trans Latino woman that died under US custody, and the queers were silent. And the sad part is that a lot of immigrant organizations were also silent because she was a trans woman. You are a trans woman, immigrant, Latina, you're invisible for the Latinos, you're invisible for the queers.
We're at the 5-minute mark in this conversation. I could be having it for hours and hours and hours. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we're at the 5-minute mark, and I just kind of want to leave, if we can all go through and just say maybe a closing statement or what you hope people take from this conversation acknowledging that this is a conversation that will continue to have to happen, a conversation that we should be having amongst each other every day, and a conversation that I don't think we're going to get to all the answers by the end of the week, right? I just want to have folks give us some closing thoughts, some retweetable moments, something to take away with us as we close this conversation. And we'll start backwards from the introduction. So we'll start with Bilal.
A closing statement. I mean, I want to thank all of us on the panel. This has been a really, really heavy conversation, really deep conversation. I was bringing up something that was said in chat about what Karleigh said about widening the circle. And in Connecticut, I feel like that's really important when we're looking at things from a justice lens, which is not to shift focus away from the urgent and pressing needs, obviously, but to just acknowledge that some of these things intersect in different ways, right? Like when Karleigh's the only person I know who talks about colonialism so regularly as like, this exists in your space and you are perpetuating it. And sometimes I think personally, right, like I tend to look the other way, because if I started looking at all the ways in which other parts of the world are boxed out of the conversation, it's just like, I'll never feel comfortable anywhere. And so that's like something for me to also acknowledge and work on, right? That, like Karleigh's saying, we have to widen the space and community self-defense. Thanks, I'll stop there.
And then we'll go with Karleigh, please.
Thanks for that, Bilal, first off, but I only do that because you did that. So I take a lot of cues from you. And I do that because the other people I've done activism work do that. And I've seen other people do that and discuss that and talk about that. I mean, we're like Kamora was saying, we're the product of the people that we get our knowledge from. I've gotten that knowledge from you and from Jesus and from Juancarlos. That's where I got that knowledge from. The biggest thing I want people to take away from this conversation is, again, community self-defense, and vigilance is an important part of that. We, as a united rainbow family, have to call out the things that need to be called out. Because in this state, two examples of where we fell asleep at the switch. One, and we can and it's not too late to fix that. But at the point of attack, we were asleep at the switch as a queer community. I'm talking about two African-American transgender high school girls who were demonized just for being who they are, and they had to basically fight alone. Where was my mainstream LGBTQ leadership in that? And where are you now? Because Betsy DeVos is still holding that gun to the head of our school children in this state. Because in this state, we respect human rights. And part of those human rights are no Connecticut school child shall be denied equal educational access under law. That's our state law. But Betsy DeVos is trying to tell you, well, I will threaten your impact aid if you keep being nice to those darn trans kids. Queer Connecticut, that's our fight. Queer Connecticut, it's our fight. We need to be in Hartford. We need to be getting in the face of every legislature. And we certainly need to tell Governor Lamont, this is more important than trying to figure out if we're going to have high school football or not. Hashtag just saying. Another issue where we as a queer community need to be heard. Today is September 13th. In 18 days, October 1st, the rent moratorium ends. Now, maybe, just maybe, Hartford will push it back again and keep kicking the can down the road. We need to say as a united rainbow family, no. Too much of our community is affected by this. Too much of every community is affected by this, especially right now when we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And we are trying to send kids to school into this. And we're trying to say, oh, essential workers, we love you into this. No, you really want to show you love essential workers? Cancel that rent. Cancel the rent CT. Hashtag cancel the rent CT if you want to know more. But that is a situation where our queer community cannot afford to fall asleep at the switch. We must be vigilant. And we must be kind to each other. And most importantly, we have to, part of that vigilance is listening. That means you have to open up that space so that whether I go by Karleigh or go by Chardonnay, I will not be made fun of. I will be a part of that space. Because yes, I'm going to talk about the fact that, oh, that's respectability politics too. We need to be prepared to accept our whole selves in this battle, love our whole selves in this battle, because it's going to take all of our whole selves in this battle to win this battle. Which side are you on, my queer people? Which side are you on?
Wow. Okay. Just need a moment to let all that love in. Jesus, any closing comments?
Wow, it's hard to follow that. I think there's two. If there are any folks, queer white folks, listening to this, I really hope that you were uncomfortable at some point during this panel. I really, really hope that you were uncomfortable. And I mean that with a lot of love, because that means that you're actually listening, and that this becomes a point in which you continue to understand the role that race and ethnicity plays in the queer experience of many, many people, and how does it play in, what role does it play in your experience as a queer folk? So any ally that is listening, any person, non-person of color, or even honestly, I've been like being intentional about this, any white Latino folk, because they do tend to also align with whiteness very, very often. I really hope that you're uncomfortable and that this triggers you to really try to grow yourself in many ways. And that, whether that is really talking to any of us, reaching out and talking to us and having this conversation, and making the space to really unlearn a lot of those prejudices that we all have, and really try to advocate for tangible change. And if you are in the nonprofit world, definitely bring that that change to your nonprofit is of utmost importance. And then for folks that are queer and of color, if you're Black, Indigenous, or any or fall under any other category within that very, very huge umbrella, this is like a very healing space for me, in my opinion. Hearing Kamora and Karleigh and Bilal, like, it's usually very healing and reaffirming. We tend to, a lot of the times, gaslight ourselves into thinking, you know what, I'm just making this up. I'm probably like just overreacting. This is not, they probably did not mean in that way. I'm just being a drama queen. No, you're not. You're valid. Your experience is valid. And we're here to reassure you that whatever you're going through, we probably have gone through it as well. And it is not you. It is living in this society, living in the US. I'm not going to say in the time of Trump, because this has been living in the US for a very long time. This is what living in the US does. And this is why it is important, as Karleigh really beautifully highlighted, to create community, to create self-defense, because at the end of the day, we have us. I don't want my queer community to depend on the straight community to have our voices heard. We're powerful within ourselves. We have the tools and the power and the knowledge and the wisdom to create the change that we need. It just is a matter of listening to those whose voices matter, and really, really taking that step towards true liberation. So yeah. All right, I'll stop there.
Thank you. And last, but definitely not least, Kamora.
Yeah, we're here, y'all. Like, and that's, if you've spoken to me in the last month, that has been what I've been saying. We're here, y'all. We're here, y'all. I'm working on a way to not frighten white people when they say, "Hey, Kamora, how are you?" and not just going, "Oh my God, I'm great," but "Oh my God, I'm great," because the conversation has started. And I'm having conversations with people who don't know how to have the conversation, but they know they need to, and it's happening. So, Juancarlos, thank you so much. Patrick, thank you so much. New Haven Pride Center, thank you. Thank you for creating a place for the dialogue, and thank you for making it clear over and over and over that this conversation didn't answer all the questions and isn't going to. This has to be an ongoing dialogue forever and ever. And this is my work, and this is my life's work. And I appreciate being able to do some of this stuff here in the queer community in Connecticut with people who've experienced me for a very long time, because this is where we've been. So I am about to share, we call ourselves a queer community. And I keep finding myself in spaces where people talk about the community that they're a part of, but haven't gone so far as to define what that community is and what it means to be a part of that community. And that's, I think, that place where we get to that nice groupthink where we're scared of conflict. And so being this person who's really wanted to do this work of getting us over ourselves so that we can see the beauty in our differences, like truly, so that we can see the beauty in our differences. Queer folks, how the heck can we step back and talk about how great we are, but refuse to acknowledge all the greatness and beauty in everyone else's identities? So over the years, I have created and I'm implementing it, and I feel it, right? This is what community is for us at the KCC. What I'm asking everyone who's watching this to do is write it down, think about it, feel it, and then decide how it does or doesn't fit. And if it fits beautifully, great. And then figure out why it fits. Don't just agree, figure out why. If it doesn't fit, think about it and figure out why it doesn't fit. And this has been a big part of my trainings recently in getting people to really figure this out. If it fits, then great, step into it. If it doesn't, pull back and understand Trump's America is creating a whole lot of places for white supremacists to go be white supremacists. That might be a space to step into. However, based on my life's work, practicing and living in community means that we are responsible to ourselves and others. It means that we're committed to engaging humbly and bravely with others who we may not agree with, but who share a similar worldview. Tensions and conflicts are gifts that allow us to grow together. That last line is the most important line to me. If we just meet in our milquetoast sameness, we never get to beauty and truth. If I can share some of my crazy ridiculousness, and if you've ever had a conversation with me, you understand I got some crazy ridiculousness that is my truth and my fundamental truth, right? If we can share that in a way that you don't believe that you need to agree with me on it, but that you can see it and share why you don't agree, that's the beauty. That is where we've created a place where we truly can live with and support each other. But if we all have to continue to meet in a lie of I'm okay, you're okay, sameness, it's not going to get there. So tensions, conflicts, gifts, keep the conversations happening, say all of the wrong words all the time, use that as a chance to figure out how to apologize beautifully from a place that's a real place and not a place that you learned how to say I'm sorry, and do it and know that you're wrong. That's it. Like, you're wrong. And I'm looking right now, I'm looking at the camera, so I'm looking at me too. Guess what? Humanity, you're wrong. Together, we can get to the ones, together we can get to truth, right? But as long as we all sit up in this place and think that we've got it right here and choose to only talk to people who look like and smell like us so that we can co-sign on each other, we're operating from here, and we're human. We should be operating from here. There you go. Thank you. That's my words.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody. I love you all very much. I'm so happy that I got to see you for a little bit. And I can't wait till I get to see you in person and we can sit around a table and have more of these conversations amongst ourselves. So I want to, again, thank our panelists, thank everyone who tuned in. We have a lot going on. I'm going to use my cheat sheet over here of everything that we have going on. So today we have at 2 o'clock, 2 different workshops. We have Decolonizing Our Nonprofits and which is an all Spanish workshop that you can attend. We have at 3:30, we have a workshop on queer youth organizing and anti-bias, anti-racism. At 5 o'clock, we have Building a Whole Community with Kamora, and also self-care and healing for organizer with Ahmed. And then at 6:30, we have a discussion similar to this one with youth And it's going to be around what does the queer community reach racial equality, and it's going to be just a youth discussion. And then at 8 p.m. we're going to have a great party of celebrating queer Black artists. So thank you so much for tuning in, for having this amazing conversation with us. And like we said, this is a conversation that continues to happen and will continue to happen. And every time we have it, we're going to be having it with you. So thank you so much. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the program today and the rest of the week. Happy Pride.